Shujayea after an agreed 72-hour ceasefire. People climbed through the rubble to try and recover whatever they could from their badly damaged homes. Since July 20th, this area has been a no-go zone. That's when Israeli bombs and artillery shells killed dozens of Palestinians and wounded around 280 others.
We came back because of the ceasefire. We found our home in ruins. Everything is gone here. All the houses, the mosque, everything.
Less than an hour after residents returned, this happened. An Israeli airstrike in the distance. Those who came back hoping to reclaim what little is left of their lives had no choice but to turn back.
Well, it's a scene of chaos and anguish here on the streets of Shujayea as people flee the area over fears of more violence.
On the main road leading out of the area, we meet Mohammed. She tells us her tears are not of sadness, but of anger.
God punished the Israelis. They destroyed my home. They attack our people. God punished them.
As we were talking, Mohammed nearly faints. The stress of leaving her home again, too much to bear. The UN-brokered 72-hour ceasefire fell apart so quickly that thousands of Shujayea's other residents left with whatever they could carry, including the remains of loved ones for burial. And with the knowledge it will be a long time before they are able to rebuild their lives. Imtiaz Taib, Al Jazeera, Shujayea, Gaza.
Well, of course, all of this is having an immensely traumatic effect on the people having to live through this. Yasser Abu Jameh is a psychiatrist in Gaza, and he joins us on the phone now. Yasser, from a psychiatric point of view, just describe for us the feeling of fear and insecurity that many, if not all, Palestinians must have right now.
Well, actually, the level of exposure during the current offensive was extremely high, given the fact that the offensive attack goes for now over 25 days and the continuous shelling overnight and day, allowing almost no child, no family to feel insecure and making people all vulnerable and making them scared. The falling bombs and shelling were falling almost everywhere and heard over many places in the Gaza Strip, making the level of exposure extremely high to the people in general and to children in particular.
Yeah, children are particularly fragile. So even before this military operation began, I know that the blockade and frequent incursions were having an effect on children's mental health. What can be done now, or can anything be done now, to protect children from the trauma of what's happening?
Well, it's extremely important now to try to minimize the level of exposure of the children to the traumatic event, given the fact that the bombardment happens almost in every place. It's a key issue to make parents offer containment to their children. Unfortunately, this is not an easy task because parents themselves are also feeling insecure and unsafe, given the fact that there are no shelters that could make people feel safety, and given the fact that almost all neighborhoods and all districts were simply targeted during the current offensive. So it's not an easy task for parents. However, it's very important to try to minimize the level of exposure and to offer containment to the children, like hugging the child, trying to make them feel secure and safe, and try to put them in a relatively safe place.
That must be a very difficult task. I can't imagine what it's like living with this kind of situation day after day. How long does it take to recover from a trauma like this?
It varies. Actually, depends upon the type and the severity of the trauma each child was exposed to. For some children, it would take just a few weeks and they will just live up and continue their life. For other children, it will be a memory that is really difficult to erase and to take them months and maybe years to just overcome. It depends. If a child was a member of a family that was targeted directly, or a house that was demolished, then it's certainly a huge task and a long-term psychological consequence that will leave.
But people have now been through, what, 3 wars in 6 years, and in Gaza there's nowhere to run to, there's nowhere to escape. In terms of long-term effect, This is going to leave some people mentally scarred, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's actually still early to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. However, a previous study that was made 1 year after the Pillar of Defense operation found out that about 30% of the children and their families who were at high level of exposure to trauma were still 1 year after the offensive suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. We have to keep in mind that the study also showed that it's very important. The socioeconomic condition of the families was a strong predictor of developing the post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not only about the level of exposure, but also the economic conditions. And when we have in mind the current siege and the blockade that's taking place since about 8 years, and that we have suffered 3 different offensive or 3 different wars within 6 years, making almost the whole people of Gaza Strip extremely vulnerable to develop traumatic disorders, and depriving them from having the ability and the resources to cope and to overcome the current difficulties, making people more and more fragile over time.
Yeah, it is a very grim picture. Thank you very much indeed for shedding some light on the mental effects of what's happening there. Yasser Abu Jameh, a psychiatrist, speaking to us from Khan Yunis there. Now we see more protests across the occupied West Bank, and 2 people were killed on Friday. Israeli police used tear gas against demonstrators in the town of